I know. With how we can all collectively agree that we've gotten a bit tired of Bridgerton constantly trotting out yet another new rake every season, and now a majority of us are all fed up at this point, my words are probably sacrilegious to some of you listening right now. You're probably all, Noria, what on earth are you smoking? There is zero reason for Bridgerton to keep tossing rakes our way other than the fact that they keep wanting to show us abs and the occasional ass shot. Which, quick side note, thank you for the fantastic service, camera team. But yeah, I know it seems like I might be reaching at this point, but what if I said that every single Rake storyline we've gotten so far has mattered to the core of the story being told? From Simon to Anthony to Colin and come season 4, Benedict too. What if I'd said that them hoeing all over Grosvenor Square was important to their character's story and arc? Don't believe me? Well, then, please give me max 15 minutes of your time for me to convince you. And if I do succeed in making my case, please don't forget to leave a comment, even if it's just a thumbs up, to let me know that you think I've made some pretty good points. Deal? Now, we cannot separate the rake as an archetype from the story of Bridgerton. From the very first introduction we got of the show, where we see Anthony rotting up against Sienna against a tree with his eyes on his timepiece to make sure that he makes it in time for his baby sister's presentation to the Queen and thus her introduction to high society, we were hit straight on the head with the information. And of course, our season 1 love interest, Simon Bassett, lived up to his rakish standards, spending his nights in the beds of nameless women and unwittingly luring virginal Daphne Bridgerton into his web that would see her masturbating to fantasies of him and being willing to marry him even with his declaration that he can't have children. Of course, the latter is because Cressida Cowper saw her and Simon heading into the gardens alone without a chaperone, and Anthony caught them making out complete with Simon's hands on her boobs. As is the stereotypical nature of rakes in such stories, he's ruined her for everyone else, and she gets to nail him down, marry him, and they then have to work out the problems that follow their marriage, considering that their sexual attraction to each other isn't the solution to all their problems. But sorry, I digress. Back to my main point. Simon in the story is someone that is portrayed to be a rake, and he fits that to a T. He's charming, he's charismatic, he's sexy, he's seemingly confident. Key word here being seemingly, as other than the fact that we know that Simon stutters when he's overcome with emotions and can't process or deal with them, there's also the fact that the rakish persona is developed over the years as being a coping mechanism for him. It's a way for him to not have any relationship that would potentially be serious, because we know from the show a serious relationship for Simon Bassett means marriage, and with marriage comes the need to have heirs. But heirs are the one thing he doesn't want, as it's his mission to both bring an end to the Bassett line as a way to punish his father for his abuse, and also to ensure that he doesn't repeat the cycle of abuse by making sure that there is actually no kids he could potentially abuse, just in case he ends up exactly like his father. I mean, we know that that isn't how things play out, because Simon is nothing like the former now deceased Duke of Hastings, but we have the benefits of foreknowledge and being able to see the pain he's so desperate to hide. And we are able to come to the conclusion, like Daphne is, that someone who is being so hurt by his father's disregard and rejection would never submit his own child to the same fate as a result of that. Simon, though, when he started on his path of being a rake, doesn't know that. But his rakish ways all worked to serve one aim: to never create a situation for himself where he would recreate his father's tyranny, and it's a way to help him punish this former duke for everything he put him through. As much as I know that there are people who cannot stand rakish Simon, it does serve the plot and his story, and it works within that context. The same can be said for Anthony Bridgerton. Although he too has daddy issues, his daddy issues are distinctly different from Simon's. Edmund Bridgerton is the father that Simon would have died to have as his father, and is 1,000 times the man that the former Duke of Hastings could never hope to be. And this includes his role as a husband as well, which is why Violet is so shattered at his passing, because Edmund was a husband who was most deserving of her love and her heart and her devotion. The devotion being core, of course, as this is the reason why Violet absolutely breaks down after Edmund's death. She's so devoted to him, to her love for him and the life they've built together, that after he's gone, she's so desperate to follow him, even in death. And this inevitably is what Anthony realizes, that to be that committed means that there is a high chance that that devotion would lead to you shattering. And so his rakish behavior is as a result of that. Once again, it's a way to protect himself, not just the woman he's meant to be with, by the way, because contrary to what Anthony is convinced himself to be true, him being a rake is meant to serve both him and his hypothetical wife that he's terrified would break should the situation ever arise that he dies as young as his father did, which I will keep saying because I really am miffed that the show didn't include that. The fact that Anthony, as at when we get to his story, is just a couple of years away from Edmund's age when he passed. And so the fear of his own mortality, is worried that he would ruin someone else because of love, like his mother was, is what helps turn him into a rake. Being a rake serves his story because it helps to protect his heart and his future bride. And before you say that, but Noria, he was with Sienna in season 1. That didn't seem like a concern for him. Well, you have to consider the fact that their class difference would never have made that a possibility for him. And he's always known that subconsciously. Like, sure, he can try and convince himself that he could make it work and he would be able to walk away. But the only time that that was even remotely possible was when there was the chance that maybe he would hurt Simon in their duel and would have to go on the run. At which point, he would not be the Viscount Bridgerton, but would instead be a criminal on the run and would thus be able to potentially have a future with Sienna. That's not commitment, nor is it devotion. It is convenience. It's escape. Anthony being a rake wasn't just something slotted into the story for the sake of, oh, there needs to be a rake because it's a Regency romance and what would the story be like if there weren't any rakes? It is equally as important because whereas Simon's rakish ways is to keep himself from becoming his father and passing on the trauma of his childhood to his own children, Anthony's rakish ways is to keep himself from becoming the reason why someone else shatters irrevocably when he is gone. Like, you can say that one reason is stronger and has more weight than the other, but it doesn't make it any less a valid reason for why Anthony would be focused on any and all things that would not lead to love and potentially put him in the position he wants no part in. And then there's the Bridgerton brother who has been a proud rake since his very first introduction in the first season, Benedict Bridgerton. And if I'm being honest, I can admit that, like a lot of the viewers, I became a tad bit irritated that Benedict's storyline in the first 3 seasons of the show so far have always been him acting as a rake with zero change, and it got boring pretty fast. But I'm also aware that Benedict being a rake works well within his story because Benedict's foray into his art is desperation to make it, and his fear and terror that is incapable of making meaningful art. It's something that speaks to his desperation to create permanence that is juxtaposed with his fear that he is incapable of it, which spills over into his relationships as well. Because yes, Benedict Bridgerton is a romantic, but just as with his art, as much as he says all the right words and it seems like he wants it, when it comes down to it, he's someone who ends up pushing away the potential of that. And we see this reflected quite clearly in his relationship with Lady Tilly Arnold in season 3, where she is ready to commit and he tells her that that isn't something he wants or is he ready for, and he walks away. Of course, we know that in season 4, by the time he meets Sophie, all that fear and hesitation will dissipate. And that is about the same time wherein his relationship with his art and his connection to said art will be cemented. Which means that there is a symbolism of his giving up his wigs as a rake and giving love a chance, coinciding with him also making the obvious choice to come back to his art and allow the vulnerability of him making art, even with his fears that he might not be as good at it as he hopes and wants to be. And then there's Colin, which I know a lot of us who watched season 3 were insistent did not need to have a rake storyline, as it was the brother who needed it the least. However, I am also aware that a slight change made at the end of season 2 that had Colin's declaration to never court Penelope Featherington happen amidst the gentlemen of the town rather than with his brothers, which was how it went down in the books, meant that the writers for the show were moving in the direction of Colin being desperate to fit in, to be one of the guys. And this is what partly fuels his transformation in the 3rd season, where we see him performing masculinity in a way to rebrand himself to better suit what is expected of him from the rest of the ton. His rakish persona therefore fits that. If the season's focus is on Colin dealing with toxic masculinity and overcoming it by the end of the first half to make the declarative statement that meant that he wasn't performing for the approval of the other gentlemen of the town anymore, and he was not going to be a party to their snide jokes and disrespect as he had been previously, then it makes sense to me that they made him into a rake to better fit within that particular storyline. Now, could we have lost the toxic masculinity plot for his character arc completely and gone with something different? Yes. But do I understand why the choice was made with regards what we got? Yes, I am. Because, say it with me now, it works for his story. It works for all the stories we've gotten so far with the Bridgertons. And it's why the writers didn't go with the rakish storyline for George in Queen Charlotte, because the core of George's character arc, which is about being accepting of his own illness and coming to the realization that he is loved regardless, does not need him to be a rake. Being a rake would not flow seamlessly with his story because the core of what concerns George is vastly different from Simon or Anthony or Benedict or Colin. And that difference matters. So yes, I do believe that Bridgerton season 1 through 3 and now 4, having the characters be rakes works because of their story being told. And based off of that, I can rest easy in the knowledge that season 5 would not have Philip go the rake route, because just as with George, his own story doesn't correlate with him having to be a rake. The same goes for Gregory, who I already made a video explaining why I think is the most romantic Bridgerton, and I will leave the video to that linked in the description bar for those interested in watching that if you haven't seen it yet, of course. But I am curious, do you agree or disagree with me that the lead character's rakish ways was as important to the plot because of the story they had to tell through their rakeism? Please let me know in the comments. Like this video if you've watched this far and haven't done so yet. Share this if you want. Support me on Patreon if you can. If you cannot, however, do consider checking out my other channels. I have a gaming channel where I put up all my gameplay footage if you're so inclined. Or you can check out my ASMR channel if you're one of those people who find my voice soothing. Whatever the case may be, I will see you tomorrow with a new video. Until then, do remember, obsessing over the things you love. Perfectly valid coping mechanism.